There is a missile flying right now that no defense system on Earth was built to stop. Not the Patriot, not Arrow 3, not David's Sling. None of them. The United States has spent $68 billion over 4 decades building and refining the Patriot missile defense system. $68 billion. That is not a budget line. That is a theology, a belief built from steel and software and political will that America can extend a protective ceiling over its allies and make enemy missiles irrelevant. Ray McGovern spent decades inside the intelligence apparatus of the United States government. He briefed presidents, he watched institutions construct elaborate justifications for systems they had already decided to believe in. And the one lesson he drew from those years, repeated with the patience of a man who had seen it proven too many times, was this: when a system's existence depends on its own effectiveness, the last thing it will do is admit it has failed. The Patriot has not failed. Not yet, but something has arrived in the conflict calculus of the Middle East that forces a precise, uncomfortable question. What happens when the physics stops cooperating? Iran calls it the Fatah 2 hypersonic glide vehicle, and if the numbers attached to it are accurate, not inflated by propaganda, not undercut by Western dismissal, then the air defense architecture that the United States and Israel have built over the last 40 years is facing a problem it was never designed to solve. This is not a story about Iranian pride or American decline. It is a story about physics, economics, and the brutal logic of modern missile. It is a story Ray McGovern would recognize immediately because he spent his career watching continent institutions collide with inconvenient realities. Let us begin with the math. In this episode, we are going to walk through three things. First, we are going to explain what hypersonic glide vehicles actually are. Not the word hypersonic is a marketing term, but the specific physics that make them dangerous in a way that ballistic missiles are not. Second, we are going to look at Israel's layered air defense system and explain layer by layer why each one struggles against this particular threat. Third, we are going to examine what Ray McGovern would call the cost exchange problem, the economic logic of modern missile defense, and explain why it may be more threatening to American strategic planning than any single weapons test. This matters right now because the Middle East is not a static situation. It is an active pressure system, and every time a new weapons capability is introduced, the entire architecture of deterrence shifts. Understanding what shifted and by how much is not optional for anyone trying to make sense of what comes next. To understand why the Fatah 2 matters, you first need to understand why traditional ballistic missiles are, in a technical sense, relatively manageable. A conventional ballistic missile follows a predictable arc. It launches, climbs to an extreme altitude, arcs over the top of its trajectory, and then falls. The physics of that path are fixed. Gravity does most of the work. The trajectory can be calculated with impressive precision the moment the missile is detected leaving the ground. This is the fundamental insight that made systems like the Patriot and the Arrow theoretically workable if you know where the missile is going, and the ballistic trajectory tells you exactly that. You do not need to be faster than the missile. You need to place an interceptor in the right place at the right time. It is geometry, not speed, that defeats a ballistic missile. Ray McGovern once described intelligence work in similar terms. The goal was never to know everything. The goal was to know enough soon enough to act. Prediction, not omniscience. Hypersonic glide vehicles break prediction. The Fatah 2, as Iran describes it, is boosted to the edge of the atmosphere by a rocket, and then it glides. It does not arc over the top of a ballistic trajectory. It skims, it maneuvers, it changes direction mid flight. And it does all of this while traveling at speeds above Mach 5, roughly 3,800 miles per hour, depending on altitude. That combination, maneuverability at hypersonic speed at low altitude, is precisely the problem. The interceptors defending Israel's skies are designed to meet a missile that is going where physics says it must go. A glide vehicle does not go where physics says it must. It goes where guidance says it should, and guidance can change. There's a second problem, less discussed, but equally important: the response time at Mach 5 to Mach 10. Closing distances compress radically. A missile traveling from Western Iran to Tel Aviv covers roughly 1,000. Iran to Tel Aviv covers roughly 1,000 kilometers. At hypersonic speed, the flight time drops to somewhere between 7 and 12 minutes, depending on the flight. That is the outer edge of the decision window for an interceptor launch. At the low end, depending on detection delay and processing time, you may have minutes, not the comfortable engagement windows that missile defense systems were designed around. This is not a hypothetical. It is an engineering constraint. Israel operates what is routinely described as the world's most sophisticated layered air defense system. The layers from lowest to highest altitude are the Iron Dome, David's Sling, and the Arrow system, Arrow 2 and Arrow 3. Each layer was designed for a specific threat profile. Understanding the gap in that design is the key to understanding the problem. Iron Dome is designed against short-range rockets and artillery shells. It operates at low altitude, low speed. It is extraordinarily effective at what it was built for. Intercept rates against unguided rockets from Gaza have been reported at between 80 and 90% in active conflict. But Iron Dome was never part of a hypersonic equation. It is simply not the right tool. David's Sling is the middle layer. It was designed to defeat medium to long range ballistic missiles and cruise missiles, the category of threat that comes from Hezbollah's longer range arsenal or from state actors with conventional ballistic capabilities. David's Sling carries the Stunner Interceptor, a radar guided missile with high maneuverability. It is a serious system. But here is the tension. David's Sling was engineered around the ballistic trajectory assumption. The intercept geometry, the calculations that tell the interceptor where to go depends on predicting where the target will be. Against a maneuvering glide vehicle, that prediction is continuously degraded. Every course change the Fatah 2 introduces new error into the intercept calculation. Arrow 2 was designed for theater ballistic missiles, the category that includes the Scud family and its descendants in intercepts inside the atmosphere at high altitude. It is an older design and would face significant difficulty against a target traveling at hypersonic speed on an unpredictable path. Arrow 3 is the most capable layer. It is designed for exoatmospheric intercept, destroying missiles above the atmosphere in space during the relatively predictable mid-course phase of a ballistic trajectory. It is a remarkable technical achievement, but a hypersonic glide vehicle's entire design philosophy is to avoid the predictable mid-course phase. It does not go high enough for Arrow 3T or reliably engage it in the exoatmospheric window. And by the time it descends into Arrow 2's range, the speed and maneuverability make the intercept geometry extremely difficult. Ray McGovern was fond of pointing out that institutions tend to evaluate new threats through the lens of what they already built to defeat. It is a cognitive reflex as much as an institutional one. The question is never asked plainly, does our system handle this specific thing? The question asked instead is, how does this new thing fit into what our system does? The FATA 2 does not fit. That is the point. The Patriot PAC-3 is the most capable version of a system that has been in development since the 1960s. The PAC-3 configuration, the version deployed to defend Israel and American assets across the region, is specifically designed for anti-ballistic missile defense. It uses hit-to-kill technology rather than proximity detonation. The interceptor is meant to physically collide with the incoming warhead. That approach demands precision, and precision demands accurate prediction. The Patriot Systems radar is called the ANCPQ. 6.5. It is a phased array radar capable of tracking multiple targets simultaneously and providing the intercept guidance that the PAC-3 missiles need. At close range and against a non-maneuvering target, it is very good. Against a target traveling at Mach rate on the flight profile that changes direction at will, the system faces two compounding problems. The first is the radar's ability to maintain a firing solution against a target that refuses to cooperate with the intercept geometry. The second is the kill vehicle's ability to physically close the distance and make contact. POAC 3 interceptor has a maximum speed of roughly Mach 5. FATA 2 traveling at Mach 8 presents what engineers call a high closing velocity problem in some engagement geometries and a tie Alchaser's problem in others where the interceptor cannot physically catch the target. The engagement envelope, the zone in which an intercept is physically possible, shrinks dramatically against a faster maneuvering target. There is no clean solution to this. It is not a software patch. It is not a hardware upgrade cycle away. The fundamental physics of interceptor speed versus target speed and maneuverability defines what is possible. The Patriot, as currently configured, was not built for this problem. Ray McGovern spent years trying to explain to people in and outside government that the most dangerous weapons are sometimes the ones that do not kill anyone. They simply change the economic logic of a conflict. Consider what we know about approximate costs. A PAC-3 adjuster missile costs in the range of $4 million per round. Some estimates go higher. That is the number frequently cited in congressional testimony and defense procurement reporting. Iran's Fatah 2 has been described by Iranian state sources as costing in the range of $200,000. That number should be treated with skepticism. Cost figures from state actors for domestic weapons programs are unreliable, but the direction of the ratio is what matters, not the precise. Even if the real cost of the Fatah 2 is 5 times what Iran claims, call it $1 million, you are still looking at a 4-to-1 cost asymmetry. The defender spends $4 for every $1 the attacker spends in a sustained exchange That is not a military problem. It is a financial one. This is not a new observation in defense economics. The problem of cost exchange asymmetry has been discussed in American military planning circles for years. But the introduction of a weapon that is also extremely difficult to intercept compounds it in a way that changes the strategic picture. If a Patriot PAC-3 has a credible intercept probability against a non-maneuvering ballistic missile of perhaps 80 to 90%, a generous figure for a single interceptor, that probability drops materially against a maneuvering hypersonic vehicle. Some analysts have suggested it could drop to below 50%. Others suggest lower. What that means in practice, to achieve a reliable intercept against a single Fatah, two, you may need to fire multiple PAC-3 rounds. The cost per defended target climbs accordingly. Now multiply that by a salvo attack, 10, 20, 50 missiles fired simultaneously or in rapid sequence, and the numbers become impossible. The United States has a finite number of PAC-3 interceptors in theater. Production rates for those interceptors are constrained by supply chains that were designed for peacetime replenishment, not wartime consumption. This is not classified. It has been raised repeatedly in public by the Congressional Budget, the Government Accountability Office. The Government Accountability Office and defense analysts, including those who are entirely supportive of American military capability. Ray McGovern, reviewing the transcript of any major defense procurement hearing, would likely have noted this with the particular patience of a man who had seen this film before. Institutions that have a powerful financial and institutions that have systems credibility will consistently find reasons to explain why the system's limitations do not apply in this specific scenario. The limitations apply. It is important to be precise here. Iran's announcements about the Fatah 2 should not be taken at face value, and they should not be dismissed entirely. Neither approach is analytical. What Iran has publicly claimed, the Fatah 2 travels at speeds between Mach 13 and Mach 15 at peak velocity during boost phase and maintains Mach 6 to Mach 8 during the glide. The phase, it uses a maneuvering re-entry vehicle capable of changing course to defeat intercept attempts. It has a claimed range of 1,400 kilometers. What outside observers can assess, China and Russia both have operational or near operational hypersonic glide vehicle programs with verified performance characteristics. The physics of hypersonic glide is well understood. Iran's aerospace industry, while less advanced than either of those programs, has demonstrated sustained progress over the past 20 years. The basic architecture of a hypersonic glide vehicle is not beyond Iran's current capability, even if the performance numbers are optimistic. The January 2024 Iranian attack on Israel, Operation True Promise, involved a combination of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones. The intercept rate was presented as very high by American and Israeli sources. What was less clearly reported was the specific intercept performance against each category of weapon and the cost of intercept relative to the cost of attack. Intelligence analysts, and Ray McGovern would be among the first to say this, do not take press releases from either side as a reliable data source. What they look for is behavior, and the behavior suggests that both mass murder and the behavior suggests that both Iran and the United States have been studying those same intercept numbers carefully, drawing their own conclusions. Deterrence is not a military concept. It is a psychological one. It works when the party being deterred believes the threatened response will be effective. The moment credible doubt enters that equation, deterrence begins to degrade. The introduction of a weapon that plausibly defeats the defender's most capable air defense systems does not need to destroy those systems to change the strategic picture. It only needs to introduce doubt. Israel has operated for decades under a strategic assumption that its air defense systems, combined with American support, create a defensive ceiling that makes a large-scale missile attack too costly to attempt. That assumption has shaped Israeli military planning, its approach to escalation management, and its willingness to conduct offensive operations in Lebanon and Syria against Iranian assets on the calculation that the defensive ceiling holds. If that calculation changes, if Israeli planners have to factor in a meaningful probability that a salvo of Fatah 2 missiles will reach their targets, then the risk calculus for offensive operations changes. The tolerance for escalation changes. The strategic space that Israel has operated in for the last 20 years begins to compress. This is what Ray McGovern would call the second order effect. The missile does not need to hit Tel Aviv to matter. It needs to be credibly capable of hitting Tel Aviv. The possibility is the weapon. American planning faces a parallel problem. The United States has made commitments to defend Israel and American assets throughout the Middle East. Those commitments are backed by Patriot batteries and the threat of American military response, but the credibility of those commitments rests on the effectiveness of those systems. If the systems are credibly degraded, not destroyed, not removed from the field, simply made less reliable, the commitments become more expensive to honor, more expensive in interceptors, more expensive in potential American casualties, more expensive in the political cost of a high-profile defense failure in front of a global audience. $68 billion is a significant investment, but investment does not guarantee performance. And in the gap between what was invested and what can be delivered, something changes. Ray McGovern spent his career in a building full of people whose professional purpose was to know things accurately. What he observed over and over was that accuracy is the first casualty of institutional comfort. The Patriot system is not a failure. It has genuine capability. It has intercepted real missiles. The people who built it and operated are serious professionals. None of that is in dispute. What is in dispute is the gap between the system's design parameters and the problem now presenting itself. That gap is not a mystery. It is visible in the engineering specifications of both the interceptor and the threat. The question is whether the institution, American defense procurement, American strategic planning, the political system that funds both, is capable of looking at that gap honestly. The history of institutions suggests the answer is eventually yes, but the word eventually carries a significant risk premium when the institution in question is making decisions about war and peace in the most volatile region on the planet. Iran has placed a bet. The bet is not that the Fatah 2 can destroy Israel. The bet is that it can change the math, make defense more expensive than offense, introduce enough uncertainty into the intercept picture that the defensive ceiling, the one that has underwritten Israeli strategic freedom for a generation, begins to feel less certain. Whether that bet is correct will be tested in the field eventually, as these things always are. Ray McGovern would not tell you what to conclude from that. We would tell you to look at the evidence, hold your certainties loosely, and remember that the most expensive lesson in strategic planning is the one learned in real time. The physics is not on anyone's side, it simply is. If this analysis gave you something to think about, a like and a subscription help this channel continue doing the kind of careful, slow analysis that the news cycle rarely makes room for. And we have a comment below with this question. Do you think the United States will accelerate development of next generation interceptors to close this gap? Or will budget constraints and institutional inertia mean the gap stays open? The conversation in the comments is often sharper than anything on cable news. This channel is not affiliated with Ray McGovern or any of his official representatives. The content you just watched is informational in nature, inspired by the publicly available teachings, writings, and interviews of Ray McGovern. It does not constitute professional advice. Before making any major decision in this area, please do your own research and consult a qualified professional.